Yes, so Geraldine, please introduce what we're learning.
Okay.
The
Today
dedication
is my
tonight.
grandma Jenny LeBlanc's yard site, and she and my grandpa came here from Hungary in 1895. They were 18 years old. They weren't yet married, and when they got on the ship, she was they were in steerage in the men's part and the women's part, and she got very sick on the ship. And my grandfather went to the captain of the ship and asked for permission to nurse her, even though they weren't yet married. And he told them they weren't married. And the captain of the ship said, be sure, just go to the part where the families are, but tell them that she's your sister. Sound familiar?
Sounds like the Torah, right?
Wow.
Torah. So he was honest, and that's what the captain told him. And when they got to Ellis Island, all of his brothers and his sister were here, and they met them, and they had to have $200 to get them to promise that they wouldn't be wards of the state. And his brother gave the money. And he said to my uncle, I had a hunch that you were bringing someone with you, so I brought extra money.
Whoa. All right.
And my grandpa was a baker, so he got a job in the bakery right away. And my other uncle who was here was a barber, so my grandpa slept on the barber chair until he had enough money. And my grandmother got a job, which what she was doing in Hungary, taking as a nursemaid to a wealthy family. And they came in the spring, and they were married in the fall when he had enough money to get them a place to live. That's their story.
Beautiful.
And I'm named after her. Even my father never knew her. She passed away in 1934, before my parents even met each other. My mother was still in high school. So that's their story, the Sarah and Abraham story.
Right. All right.
So I asked Rabbi to please, if we could dedicate the learning in her memory, since I have no place to say Kaddish.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, and her name is Sora Bat Sholem Meyer. And I don't even know her mother's name. Never knew it.
Right. Those were the days.
Thank you.
Those were the days. Okay, thank you. All right, so here we are. And the Torah reading for this Shabbat is a famous Torah reading, and the Shabbat has a special name. It's called Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of song, of singing. And we have gotten out of Egypt, and we march along, and we think everything is fine, except that Pharaoh decides that he made a big mistake to let us go. So he starts running after us. He catches up with us on the 7th day after we left Egypt. So that means the 7th day of Pesach, as we recall it, as we observe it, throughout the generations. And he comes and he catches up with us right at the shore of the Red Sea. And we panic out. We have no place to go. It's too dangerous to go into the sea. They're coming after us. And God protects us through the night. And during the night, the sea begins to start separating out because of big winds and so on. And finally, in the morning, with the Israelites walk through on dry land in between the two sides of the sea. And then as the Egyptians proudly and arrogantly and confidently start running after them, the waters start crashing back down and they're all drowned. And then we spontaneously break out in song. And that song is memorialized in our Torah reading. And we recite it traditionally every single day. It's part of the introduction, the Psukei de Zimra, the introductory singing section before we get to the main part of the morning service. So it's something that we have always remembered and celebrated. And we read it on Pesach on the seventh day, and we read it this Shabbat when it comes into just the regular flow of reading the story of the Torah. But that's not the only part of the Torah portion that there is. After that, we have the rest of life, and we have the rest of our wanderings in this new blank space of freedom that we start occupying. And guess what? It's tough. It begins to get challenging. So we have another problem with water, and then we come to some water, but it's not drinkable. And God says to Moses, you know how you're going to fix this water? You're going to sweeten this water by throwing a tree into the water. Take that tree over there and throw it into the water. And miraculously, the water becomes wonderfully drinkable. It's no accident that this Torah reading is always read right before Tu B'Shvat, the holiday, the birthday of the trees. So Monday is Tu B'Shvat, if I'm not mistaken. And this Torah reading always precedes the celebration of Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat, which is considered the Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of a new year for the trees. So, so it's very appropriate that we have this story in the Torah. Then we go on, and then there's a big section in the Torah about the fact that not only do we have a problem with water, we have a problem with food. So God solves that problem and with another miracle, and we get bread from heaven. Lechem min hashamayim is exactly how God describes the manna, the man, and we have a whole elaborate both story and also rules and regulations about the manna. I wrote a little bit about this in the Torah Sparks, because this is where Shabbat re-enters the world. Since the time of creation, there has been no Shabbat. Nobody is observing Shabbat as something that is part of their system of life, their practice. And now all of a sudden, and we haven't gotten the Torah yet, remember, right? We get this special injunction that the man is tied up with observing Shabbat, and it's both tied up in a natural rhythm. You know, you'll every morning you wake up and there's the man on the ground, but Shabbat there will be no man on the ground. So that's a kind of a heavenly observance of Shabbat. And then God says, I also don't want you going out there and looking for man. And I don't want you, hoarding the man during the week. And don't worry, on Friday, there'll be a double portion and you'll have enough for Shabbat. So there's a human behavioral set of rules that is involved in Shabbat. And there's the heavenly marking of the rhythm of Shabbat as well. So we get through that. And then, I don't want to, I hope I'm not skipping anything else. Yes, then we have the very famous, how could I forget? We have the very famous story of Moses hitting the rock and getting water for the Jewish people. And this time God tells him to hit the rock. Later on, right, we remember that at the very end of our biblical story of the wandering in the desert, there'll be another water shortage. And that time Moses hits the rock and God gets angry at him. But here, Moses is told to hit the rock. He hits the rock, the water flows through, and everybody is happy. And then at the end of the Torah reading, you have the entrance of the ultimate villain, right? The super quintessential bad guy, who is Amalek. And God says, I will have an eternal battle against Amalek until I finally will defeat Amalek. It's going to take time, but I swear that I will do this. And in terms of this first encounter, after Amalek attacks Israel and attacks we find out in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, the stragglers, the people who were sort of slow in keeping up with everybody else. Joshua has to go out and lead a force in battle with Amalek. And we have also then this very dramatic image that Moses has to keep his hands up high. And as long as he can do that, Amalek will be defeated. If he gets too tired, then if he lets his hands down, then the fortunes of Israel will fall. So he has two people holding up his hands so that, God forbid, he shouldn't drop them. And we defeat Amalek, but we don't defeat Amalek once and for all. That's the end of the Torah portion. So that's what we have in our Torah portion. Tremendous amount of stuff there. But the highlight, as I said, that gives the Shabbat its special name is the song, the shira, the singing. That's, it's just like in English, the word singing can be a verb or a noun. Shira can be both a verb or a noun. Shabbat shira. So now we go to our Haftarah. So this, I think, is the longest Haftarah of the year. It's got it starts in our Torah, in our Eitz Chaim Chumash. It starts on page 424. And this is chapter 4. And the rabbis did us a favor and they eliminated the first 3 verses of chapter 4. So we didn't have to read too much. I think it's over 50 verses altogether. So it starts with chapter 4, verse 4. And if you have that in the book of Judges, so if you have that in front of you, you can see that this is a regular run-of-the-mill text. It's prose. It tells us a whole story. We'll get to the story in a second. And then when we turn to 426 and we get to chapter 5 of Judges, then we see that it's written in a special form, just like the format that we have in the Torah for the song at the Red Sea. We have this also written in this kind of big alternating between text and open space, spread out kind of format. And did they do that in yes, right? So that is Deborah's song, and that's the obvious connection between our Torah reading and our Haftarah. And Deborah's song goes on for a couple of pages, right? It goes on and through till 4:30. So there's 31 verses of the song plus all of the narrative beforehand. The Sfardim don't have the custom of reading the narrative. They only read the song. We're going to take a tiny peek at the narrative, and then we're going to spend our time reading the song itself, because that's limitations that we have. But if you want to hear the whole thing, come to Shul, and we'll read the entire Haftarah, God willing, this Shabbos. Yes, Geraldine.
It's so long that usually Andy and I split it, and I read the first section and he reads the second. But I won't be until to be able to do that because of the COVID this year.
COVID? What's COVID? Something happened that I'm not aware of? So, okay. So, yeah.
Every year before Tu B'Shvat, COVID.
Right. Oy. All right. Anyway, what I do want to do, though, is just again, give a couple of background verses from the narrative before we jump into the to the song text itself. So starting with chapter 4, verse 4, we're introduced to Deborah. So does anybody want to do us the honor of reading? Thank you. Sarita was first. She was quick on the draw there.
Start with 4.
So start with verse 4. Okay, go ahead.
Deborah, wife of Lapidot, was a prophetess. She led Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would come to her for decisions.
Okay, so the Deborah is introduced with 2 titles, right? She has 2 job professional credentials, right? One is she is Isha Neviah. She is a woman prophet, or a woman who prophesies, right? And then we have this idea, wife of Lapidot, Eshet Lapidot. It's not quite sure what, that's one translation. Other people translated in the rabbinic tradition, maybe a little bit differently. That Lapidot is also the word for wicks or torches. So we had in the Gemara, if you look in the note, BT Megillah 14a, which in our Chevra Shas, we were studying only a few weeks back, that she donated light to the temple. So that was why she's called the woman of torch wicks, right? So she has this kind of title. And the translation we have here, she led Israel at that time. It's an adequate translation, but misleading. The word in Hebrew is he shofta et Yisrael. And this is in the book of Shoftim. Shoftim, a shofet is a judge. So she was judging, that's like a continuous, present continuous construct. She was judging Israel at that time. Some of us have encountered discussions about this. How does this fit with the fact that she is a woman? How could that possibly be, that she could be a judge and have this leadership role and make judicial decisions? Mishpat, that's the last word of that fifth verse, right? Vayalu eleha b'nei Yisrael la mishpat. They all came up to her. The children of Israel came up, ascended to where she was for judgment, for rulings. So how could that be? So here we have anyway, this became a problem in later rabbinic tradition, which excluded women from those kinds of leadership roles. A woman rabbi, who ever heard of such a thing? So, and if you look through the Mishnah and the Talmud, there are no women rabbis, right? So could a woman have that kind of leadership role? Clearly here it happened. And it's one of the, admittedly in the Bible, one of the few places where we have a woman taking such a leadership role. We're going to see that this is very important. It's not just the elephant in the room, it's brought out quite explicitly. I just want to mention one other thing here, Tomer Dvorah, right? The palm tree of Deborah, the palm of Deborah, right? It means palm tree. Tamar is a date, a date palm, and the dates that grow from a palm tree. So she's known to have this place, and it's a pilgrimage site. People know that that's where they're going to come to, here we are, Tu B'Shvat again. Here's this, very important identification. This woman, she's not sitting in the Mishkan area. She's not sitting wherever the tabernacle has been set up to serve the ritual needs of the people. She sits under this tree, and everybody knows that's her tree, and that's where people go. So a very interesting image. Let's just go a couple of more verses, and then we're going to switch over to the song. Go ahead. 6.
She summoned Barak, son of Abinoam of Kedesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, has commanded, go, march up to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun. And I will draw Sisera, Jabin's army commander, with his chariots and his troops towards you up to the Wadi Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hands." But Barak said,
So she summons this guy Barak, right? It's a name that some of us have heard before, and he she assumes that he's going to be able to be this general, this military leader. But let's see very explicitly what we have here is she's telling him what to do, right? She's telling him, hold on, I'm getting a computer thing. Hey. Okay. She's telling him to muster the troops and to fight against Sisera. Sisera is the general of the Canaanites. And the Canaanites have been subjugating Israel. That's part of the backstory, the first 3 verses of the chapter that we're not that we didn't read. So Israel is under the thumb of the Canaanites, and she gets a communication from God. She's a prophet that God says, okay, guess what? Now I'm with you, and now you're going to be able to defeat the Canaanites and get the army going. Okay, so she's delegating. Now, verse 8.
But Barak said to her, if you will go with me, I will go. If not, I will not go.
Okay,
Very
so-
well.
So Barak is what do you make of that? What do people think that's all about? Yeah, Lynn.
He's like, you think that's a good idea? Well, let's test it, and you come with me. And if it doesn't work, you're going to be in trouble.
Right. So I'm not taking the lead on this. I'm not taking full blame. I don't know if this is going to work out or not. So you're going to have to do this. Or we could add a little more to that. I mean, it's along the same kind of lines, though. Yeah, Jen.
I was thinking actually it was more like when Elizabeth I went in full armor as far as she could go to face the Spanish Armada. Like they wanted that symbolism, and she's their prophetess and their luck apparently. So like she's the one who's speaking with God. So I think he just wants her as close by as possible for inspiration. Rather, I don't know if it's cowardice. He just wants that
Right.
that like living symbol
Right.
of
So it's
that
not
God is with him.
good.
But also,
But
won't that,
is that how you say Jen Moss in Japanese or Korean or what?
Oh yeah, that's a Japanese, Mosu Jen. Yeah, so that's because this is for my Japanese class too. Sorry.
Very cool. No, great. Very cute. So,
I was
yes,
just
Serena.
thinking, I was thinking that also people come to her, people trust her. And so this might be a way also of inspiring, more people to come. Just he might be sort of acknowledging that he isn't that inspirational. Yeah.
Right. So what we have here okay,
Oh.
David. Yeah.
It kind of evokes for me the vision of Moses on the tell with his arms up. So she's going to be nearby, as though to help push this battle over the edge.
Right. He personifies that divine connection.
Yeah.
So so what we see here is that in different kinds of ways, Devorah is recognized as a very significant figure, right? It's not just that Barak is saying, oh, you know what? If this doesn't work out, I can always blame her. But rather, a lot of this is positive, right? It's because she's so significant. That's why I'm going to be able to succeed here. Right? I'm going to be able to succeed in getting the 10,000 soldiers. I'm going to be able to succeed in deploying them. We're going to have a good outcome because you're going to show everyone, and you're the inspiration. You're the inspiration, and you're the leader. So, but he puts it in a conditional. He says, you know what? If you want to stay back, then I'm not going. I'm only going to go if you go. So what does she answer?
Very well, I will go with you, she answered. However, there will be no glory for you in the course you are taking, for then the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh.
Okay, that's as much as we're going to go. So Devorah is no shrinking wallflower. She says to him, okay, you're not scaring me. That's fine. You're not discouraging me. I will do this. But you should know that you're not getting you're not going to get any glory out of this, right? All of war has always been to glorify the courageous warriors, whether they lose or win. How much, if they die in battle, it's glorious. If they win in battle, it's glorious. If they win and die in battle, it's doubly glorious. I mean, there's nothing better than war. There's nothing better than war, to make a man glorious. And she says, guess what? I'm going to go with you, but this is going to be a woman's achievement. right? Sisera will fall because of a woman. Okay, so what we would assume at this point is, what is she saying? Who's she referring to?
Herself, but it's not.
Shh, Rita, please. Right. Yes. At this point, it's a little ambiguous, but the most immediate association we have is, yes, it'll all be Deborah's glory that will be celebrated. Yeah, David, what did you want to say?
Yeah, just one thing more. You asked what qualified Deborah to judge Israel, and the one thing that comes immediately to mind is prophetess, but the translation that I have of Lapidot refers not to wicks. It describes her as a fiery woman.
Okay. That's a nice translation. Where do you get, whose translation is that?
This is, what is this? Stone edition.
Good old Stone. Very good.
Yeah.
So that's Art Scroll. So,
An interesting
right.
take.
Yes. So they may even have some notes about why she was able to be accepted as a judge. So, and we have had discussion about that already, but so we're not going there. So yes, she definitely is proud, very, very, forthright,
Confident?
and she's a leader, and she doesn't mince words. And not only does she tell Barak what to do and what's going to happen, she's a prophet after all, but now after, fast forward, there is a battle. The battle is successful on the part of the Israelites. Sisera himself runs away from the battle because he sees that he has no hope and he's trying to save himself. And he ends up taking shelter with a tribe called the Kenites. And the tribe is one of the sub-tribes of the people who draw their lineage from Yitro, from Moses' father-in-law. So they're sort of cousins of the Israelites, and they're in the area, but they're identifiably different. They're the Kenites. They're not Israelites. So Sisera assumes that he's actually going to be able to save his skin there, and instead Yael, whose tent he comes into, keeps him there and shrewdly makes him feel comfortable. And then she feeds him and he's exhausted, he falls asleep. And then she smashes his skull with a tent stake. And this is the pre-Judith and Holofernes story. Some people know about that story, which is in the Apocrypha and became part of Christian tradition, became a big subject of paintings. And that's a whole other thing to look at. So that's, and then Barak, who has been in hot pursuit of Sisera, finally catches up with him at the tent, and there, voila, there he is lying dead in his own blood. And Sisera is the person who has done him in. And
Yael.
Yael, right? Yael has done Sisera in. Excuse me, and thank you. And it's like putting on your shirt backwards. You like getting everything wrong. So so she ends up being a crucial savior in this particular situation. And of course, Barak, who, all things being equal, he would have been able to get there and then cut his head off or whatever. He doesn't get the glory of subduing and defeating and killing his rival. Okay, now we come to chapter 5 in Judges, and this is the Song of Victory. So, what's the connection to our Haftarah? To our Torah reading. I did it again. What's the connection to our Torah reading? A song. First of all, it's a song. Okay. What else?
It's a song of sort of triumph. And
okay. Let's look back at our
well,
Torah reading for a second. And let's go to the very end of our song. Let's look at page 412. This is Exodus 15, verse 20 and 21.
Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her and danced with timbrels. And Miriam chanted for them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver he has hurled into the sea."
Okay, which is a pretty much the ditto of the song that we have the full version of earlier with Moses leading the Israelites. So do we see any further overlap, any further connections here? Absolutely, right?
Yeah, blessing God, yeah.
And who's called a Neviah?
Miriam.
Miriam is a Neviah, right? So this is the first time we have Miriam identified as a prophet. And she is, of course, a woman. And this is not to be taken for granted. So, and I've said this, any number of times in Shul, unfortunately, in our Siddur and in our customs, we never take that part of the biblical text as part of the song, and we should. So we always think that the song ends before that, but it doesn't. It's just that the text can't give us parallel columns of who the men are singing and the women are singing. Moses is leading and Miriam is leading. But that text tells us that this song was simultaneously being sung by Miriam, and she is one of the people singing. So for instance, when I lead the davening, we say Tehilot right before the Amidah in the morning, right? We say Tehilot L'Kenayam Baruch Baruch Moshe Uvnei Yisrael L'Chanu Shira. Moses and the children of Israel chanted a song to you. And we sing Micha Mocha, which comes from the song at the Red Sea. I make it a point to say Moshe u Miriam Uvnei Yisrael. And when I recite the song at the Red Sea in the morning prayers, I add these verses at the end of the song because they're part of the song. So we should pay attention to this kind of stuff. In Ma'ariv, the same thing. Malchutcha uvanecha boker yam lifnei Moshe u Miriam, right? And L'chanu Shira, etc. So this is something, again, right now we don't have it. In other Sidurim, this is included in parentheses, is an optional way of including things. So this is a choice that people can make consciously. Okay, so the idea that a woman leading us in song is in our Torah reading, very much off topic. Wait a second. This is, how do you say it in that Japanese?
Masujen.
Masujen. Masujen has something in the chat.
Masujen, yeah, I guess.
Masujen. So very much off topic, but I've always wondered if Yael driving the tent stake into Sisra's head inspired Charlotte Corday to stab Marat to death during the French Revolution. She needed somebody to inspire her?
Well, I mean, I would assume it's actually really hard to get the guts to actually drive a tent stake through somebody's skull and into their brains and all the mess with that. And it was an equally messy death. And Charlotte Corday was this really nice girl before that. So, but she had this biblical story to go by. Right? And after, yeah. Well, she didn't live very much longer, but yeah. So yeah, like I feel like you need an example to really be able to do something that gutsy.
Right. So that would be something for you to look into, what her awareness of this story was. As I said before, the Judith and Holofernes story had overshadowed this story because that was more of the Christian biblical tradition. So that became much more well known. And for instance, Artemisia Gentileschi was a great Renaissance painter, a woman, not that many of them, right? And she did these very dramatic paintings, a couple of paintings of Judith and Holofernes. I don't think she ever did Yael and Sisera, but there are renditions of that too. So yeah, look it up. Audrey.
Given how patriarchal the Torah is, and then you have these stories of Miriam and Deborah
and Yael.
what, I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to say, except that they're so significant. How does the tradition treat these stories in terms of a woman's place in leadership?
So how does the tradition, let us ask
They ignore them.
our crowd. Well, we didn't quite ignore it. First of all, it's in the Torah.
Yeah.
Second of all, we chose this Haftorah to recite every year, right? But what do we do with it? What have been the strategies for us to deal with this kind of stuff? Anybody?
Well, I think that these women have been treated as exceptional. So, hey, everybody else, don't think that this means that all women are equal. No, there are just these extraordinary women.
Right.
And most women aren't like that, right?
Right. The
But that's
exception-
As if
true.
most men are either, right?
And that's true for a lot of oppressed people. Like there's exceptional, that we have that here in the United States with Black people. If someone really makes it, it's because they're exceptional.
Right. The
So
exception
Yeah.
proves the rule, right? They're
And Joan of Arc is
they're the
still
outlier. What?
Yeah.
I said Joan of Arc is still pretty unique. It's not like all these women went into the military after her.
Not like,
So
right? No. So yeah, I think that it's sort of compartmentalized, marginalized, and to a certain extent forgotten about. Like I said, we don't usually, it takes an effort to put the Miriam part of the song back into the Siddur. In general, it's not there. People don't even bat an eye about it. It doesn't bother them that it's not there. So we read it in the Torah, but by that time we're sort of dozing and waiting for the song to be over already. So we just sort of forget about it. We can definitely, how many times have we heard "love your neighbor as yourself"? A lot of times. Guess what? It's not the operating principle of life. in the
Okay,
world.
it's just
So,
that basic.
so we have a great talent for hearing things and then not really, doing anything about it.
Okay.
Yeah, David. Yeah.
I would, am I muted? No. I would say that women leadership is acknowledged and not encouraged. It's just sort of there. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Okay, now let's go on.
That's not that if you were right, that would be wonderful.
Hmm.
It's not encouraged. It's not encouraged. It's not acknowledged.
It's
The exception idea is the excuse why Deborah could get away with it. But don't you ever think that you can be another Deborah?
Hmm.
For millennia, women could not do the significant things in Jewish life, including being counted in a minyan. That's leadership. The answer is yes, because guess what? Since you're not capable of doing all these things, you can't count. You're not full-fledged. So, when I've told this story before, when the British took over the mandate of Palestine from the Turks, from the Ottoman Empire that was destroyed after World War I. So they said, okay, we have to organize this subject population that we're now in charge of. So who's going to be the representatives of the Jewish community in Palestine? Who do we talk to? Who's going to be our go-betweens? Who's going to represent the community? We need people to be elected to be the representatives of the Jewish community. And that election, which was on, before you didn't have anything like that. So, there was like this glimmering of democracy. The Ottomans didn't care who was elected. They just dealt with whoever had power and standing. But the British had this idea that the Jewish community should elect some kind of council of leadership. Who gets to vote? Who gets to stand for office? So there's a huge fight. Remember, there was a tremendous, it wasn't just 10%, there was a tremendous representation of traditional Jews, of Orthodox Jews. And it was clear to them that women would not be able to vote and that women would not be able to stand for office. And if you think it's only Orthodox Jews that have that problem, when were women given the vote in the United States?
Early 1900s. No, later.
Yeah, no. In the
1920.
1920, right, or 21, right?
We
We recently celebrated 100 years of finally giving them as if it's a them, but there it is. It comes out naturally, just trips off the tongue. That women could vote was an outrageous idea. So it wasn't that it just wasn't encouraged. It was not allowed. Women's leadership was not allowed. And to this very day, look in any Haredi party in Israel, you will not see a single woman in their political party. They're not allowed to be there. So this is halacha. Rav Kook of blessed memory was a great genius, a great forward-thinking rabbi. He prohibited women from voting and from running for office. My guy, Rabbi Hershenson from Hoboken, by that time he was in Hoboken. He was in Hoboken because they kicked him out of Israel for being a heretic. He said, of course they can vote, and of course they can run for office. And Deborah becomes one of the main, questions. Is she an example, or is she an exception? So so it's not as innocuous as we would like to think it is. Okay. So meanwhile, we haven't got to the song.
Right.
So let's get to the song a little bit.
On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang, "When locks go untrimmed in Israel, when people dedicate themselves, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O potentates. I will sing to the Lord, will hymn the Lord, the God of Israel. O Lord, when you came forth from Seir, advanced from the country of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens dripped, yea, the clouds dripped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, him of Sinai, before the Lord, God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anat, in the days of Yael, caravans ceased, and wayfarers went by roundabout paths. Deliverance ceased in Israel, till you arose, O Deborah, arose, O mother in Israel."
Okay, so that's a mouthful. So we have here Deborah singing. Barak is given a little credit here also. He's joining in on the singing. But it's Dvorah, it's Deborah who's leading it. And if anything, he's going to do the counterpoint, right? He's going to repeat after me, right? Deborah's going to go, okay, listen, I'll say a phrase and then you repeat, right? So she's the leader. And at the last words that we read in that verse 7, she's speaking first person, right? Until I arose. Deborah, I, a mother in Israel, right? So this is very proud, very.
But the translation here says till you arose. That actually puzzled me.
That's what it says in the English?
Yeah, which it made no sense because she's singing.
God. What can I do? Have I ever criticized these translations? The Hebrew is ad shekamti Torah, until I arose. Do they talk about it in the whatchamacallit? In the
No.
I can't believe it. I'm shocked. This is my problem. I read the Hebrew. So yes, bad translation. The translation should be faithful to the Hebrew. The Hebrew is I, Dvorah, mother in Israel, have arisen. Yes, I have arisen. Kamti. I have arisen to be a leader in Israel. What does she say before that? She says in the previous verse, in the time of Shamgar ben Anat, the Shamgar, the son of Anat, was one of the earlier judges. He is described in the book of Judges previously. So he's a judge, and judges are leaders, and they're also heroes, right? They have each judge. Nobody becomes a judge in the book of Judges unless they save the Jewish people from trouble, even if it's only temporarily, even if it's only partially. So Shamgar ben Anat is a hero, and yet people are afraid to go out in the roads. There's no security. Everybody feels that it's dangerous out there, right? Everybody has had to take roundabout ways of getting where they have to go because they understand that it's just too tricky to be out there. He is paired with what other leader?
Yael.
Oh, so interesting. What's going on with this Yael? So we had an impression from before that this is one of those nice, nice young women, like Jen was talking about, who just happens to be in this tent. And then she uses her charm to get the guy off guard, and then wham, she gets him. But here we have an allusion to Yael as a leader. She was a significant person in her own right. And maybe that's why actually Sisera maybe thinks that he can be there, because she leads this parallel community and she has some clout, pun intended, that she can exercise maybe on his behalf. Nevertheless, both Shamgar and Yael are not total successes until I came on the scene, Devorah, right? So we've got that really, proud declaration. There's another interesting thing, though, of that we should pay attention. Shamgar is an Israelite, right? He's an Israelite judge. Yael is explicitly not. When she is given the headlines and the glory, we should remember she's not one of the Jews. She's actually from this other neighboring, people. So this story is not just upending the patriarchy to a certain extent, like what Audrey was saying before. It's also upending a simplistic way of thinking about where all of the merit is, where the miracles come, apply, and so on and so forth. And this brings us to another super important point. We say, look, it's clear what the connections are between the Torah reading and here. But now let's look at a major difference.
Yeah.
Sarita.
Yeah, I was just noticing that in the Torah reading, I mean, it's all about God performed these miracles. And here God is certainly mentioned. It's not like God is absent, but now this is people, Deborah in particular,
Right.
if God works, it's through that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So look at this, for instance. Let's look again. Let's look at 3 and 3, 4, 5. One more time.
Hear, O kings, give ear, O potentates. I will sing to the Lord, will hymn the Lord, the God of Israel. O Lord, when you came forth from Seir, advanced from the country of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens dripped, yea, the clouds dripped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, him of Sinai, before the Lord, God of Israel.
Okay. So we get this very, very impressive, miraculous, mythic concept of God striding forth. The whole earth shakes and is right. So where was God in this story? Barak gets 10,000 people together. They have a successful battle against this other army. The general runs away. A woman who's not even from our group then smashes his head in. Where's God? So God is the voice that Devorah hears telling her that they should do this, right? This is all by God's command. But in the Torah, Moses doesn't split the Red Sea. Yes, he goes through this symbolic act of putting his staff out there, but this is all, God makes things happen. God is the one who literally, defeats the Egyptians. Without God, we wouldn't have had a song. So in the Torah reading, it's God all the way down. Here, God is a metaphor, right? God is this symbol that is being, extolled in a very poetic way, but all of the might that God has evinced has been, like Surya says, through human beings. It's a completely different, reality that we have here. And this is very, very significant. They're put in conjunction with each other, We talked about we talk about this a lot in when we study Talmud and Megillah, because we're talking about Purim. Purim is the quintessential holiday of where is God, right? That God is not even mentioned, and yet we say this is all God's doing. Here, that's what Devorah starts at the very beginning. It says, I want to give God credit, even though nobody has seen God anywhere, even though we haven't had a miracle. There's not a single miracle here. There's no miracle stories here, right? It's all human guile and wiliness and courage and strength. And that's God, right? I want to put God up front, says Devorah. We shouldn't forget that this is not us, this is God. But by the way, it's also me, right? You know, I do take some credit here, right? We have a minute or two left. Let's go down to, let's go down. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's like I said, we have to, Okay, so let's look from 12. Let's turn the page, 428, and let's read real quick. We have exactly, a minute, 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Awake, awake, O Deborah, awake, awake, strike up the chant. Arise, O Barak, take your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then was the remnant made victor over the mighty. The Lord's people won my victory over the warriors.
Yay.
The Lord.
From
Keep going.
Ephraim, okay, from Ephraim came they whose roots are in Amalek. After you, your kin Benjamin. From Machir came down leaders. From Zebulun, such as hold the marshal's staff. And Issachar's chiefs were with Deborah. As Barak, so is Issachar, rushing after him into the valley. Among the clans of Reuven were great decisions of heart.
Okay, so we're not going to be able to, explain all of this, but she's giving credit now to those people who came out in force to fight according to her call to battle, right? So she names certain tribes as being very responsive and stepping up to the plate. Now she goes, go ahead.
And why then did you stay among the sheepfolds and listen as they pipe for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuven were great searchings of heart. Gilead tarried beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why did he linger by the ships? Asher remained at the seacoast and tarried at his landings. Zebulun is a people that mocked at death. Naphtali on the open heights.
Okay, so we have a couple of tribes that are singled out for opprobrium. You were chickens. You didn't. You think you're such big stuff, but you're far away and you didn't come here. And other people who put their life on the line, right? So this is very, very human, very specific about the struggle of the Jewish people at this point to hold themselves together as a United States of Israel, right? Who's answering the call and who's not answering the call. So there's a lot here, as opposed to in our Torah reading, where it's universal, right? This is one people, all under the cloud of glory of God, who have been extricated from Egypt and now see God's wonders. Now we're in real life, and some people get it and some people don't. All right, that'll be enough for today, unfortunately. So next week, you're invited to study with the visiting rabbinic candidate. And I hope you have a good Shabbat this Shabbat and next Shabbat. And then we're back together the following Thursday night. Sei gesund.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.